bag open. And don't let them sit on the ground where they're going to get wet and leach. So this was just something we mentioned earlier on. No matter if you're using compost, manure, or fertilizer, you basically shouldn't be aiming to get the maximum yield possible, because that may not be good for your pocketbook and it may not be good for the environment. So really you have to find the point where it's paying off, where you're getting the maximum return for your dollar or your time, and you're satisfied with your crop yield.
And that's that. What we presented, and our goal was 25 minutes, whether we achieved that or not, we're not sure, was that yellow book that you have. We tried to summarize that and just kind of explain some major points. That book is published on the Department of Ag, Food and Markets website, and it's also that yellow book that you had, so you can find it either way. So, thank you all for coming out tonight.
You're welcome.
Thank you guys for coming. I have a very small token of our appreciation, because we are, as most of you know, a non-taxing government authority. But we did want to appreciate you guys for coming out tonight and presenting. So thank you
That's very
very
nice
much
of
for
you.
coming.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, appreciate it.
It's our pleasure.
Does anyone have any last minute questions? Thank
We
you
can
all
stick
for
around a
coming
little
in.
bit.
Certainly.
Yeah.
Thank you. It's Pat, right, who brought the muffins? Thank
Yeah,
you. for
they were
bringing the
delicious.
muffins.
Thank you. I had a jalapeno one.
Two quick questions. Pesticides and compost. Does composting break down any pesticides? Or I'm wondering about, you know, if it's not manure, but, you know, other, you know, things that have been grown with pesticides applied and then cut and composted.
Some materials will, and not all. And it depends on how the compost is made. I mean, there's a variety of different recipes, and if it gets to, we were discussing this earlier, I think we agreed on 140 degrees for a 24-hour period. Chances are we'll break down most of the toxic microbial, kill many of the weed seeds, and also denature many of the pesticides that are there. But it really depends on the pesticides. Like Roundup on its own kind of goes into inert forms within 4 days. But certainly malathion is not just going to quickly break up. And so I don't fully know what ones will.
Right.
I know some do, and I know not all will.
And yes, definitely chemical bonds are broken and new chemical bonds are formed in that composting procedure. And really, it's going to have a lot to do with moisture present in the compost, temperature, in materials, minimally. So yes, but we could not take a stab at how well the pesticides are broken down into safer
Are there tests
forms.
or?
Several years ago, there was a big problem in the Seattle area where municipal leaf and yard waste, and it was mostly lawn clippings that were being treated with an herbicide, a lawn herbicide called clopyralid, that was found did not break down in composting to the extent that when people were using that compost, it was killing the seedlings. And since that time, there are warnings on if that material is even out there anymore. I'm not certain,
I don't know.
but I know there's warnings that do not compost leaf clippings that are, on which this material is used because it will persist. But for the most part, things seem to degrade
I guess
to
it's,
some extent.
the federal government doesn't think of it as a big enough problem that they regulate it for the organic program. So,
That's right.
you know, we have the National Organic Program, and there's not language in that compost, how you compost instructions to really address that it's a problem.
Might there also be antibiotics in, like if manure is used?
Yes.
And that
could
could be a problem as
Could be.
well.
I don't know how much of a problem, but certainly there are some residual antibiotics that I've read about in compost that happens. It doesn't break down all of those. Certainly antibiotics leaching into waterways is a major issue that we've
Yeah.
all read about, Long Island Sound and so on and so forth, medical waste. But yeah.
In a way, it's a young science, and that's why we're so fuzzy. And probably if our sons and daughters were to follow in our footsteps and go to school for agriculture, they would know a whole lot more in 20 years than we know now about that.
It's also interesting on that science, with that point, soil fertility, which was where I focused on in grad school, has undergone a revolution in the last 7 years. What I learned is absolutely being re-examined. And the new form of soil fertility and the new form of nutrient management plans is entirely changing. And so will the NRCS programs in the next 5 to 10 years probably change with those, which is fascinating. You know, you studied it, you spent all the hours, you thought you knew it, and they're saying, well, not so much. So, the master of the blueberry, who was the guy from Rutgers? It used to be that don't bother testing leaf samples for blueberries to get nutrient needs. It's useless. Just use soil tests. That's entirely changed now. Now, if you want to know how much fertilizer to give to your blueberries, it's the tissue test that tells you that. So it's interesting, how science changes. But you had one more question?
Yeah, does the extension maintain lists of local suppliers for like things like, I was just happened to be looking at cover crop seeds recently, and I'm going around to a bunch of local places. It's going to be cheaper for me to order quantity from the Midwest and pay for UPS to bring it here. So I was wondering if you had local supplier lists or things like that.
I don't. The Department of Ag might have that. Yeah, with William Jelly.
No,
but I
not
don't
so
have
much,
that.
but NOFA New Hampshire is doing a pretty good job at building such things. Yeah, and they do through, have you heard of Fedco?
Yeah.
They do a spring bulk order through Fedco.
That
Yeah.
was due the end of February or
Yeah, so it's too
mid-February,
late this
unfortunately.
year. But you can get a lot of those bulk goods like that
Okay.
at a less expensive price by doing that. But I mean, I don't maintain lists because I live in fear of leaving someone off and getting in trouble. But I know lots of different companies, and I would never give you one. I'd give you lots of options.
Sure. Yeah.
So,
Thank you.
And Jenny, we've decided we're not doing autographs tonight, right?
Not tonight. We'll wait till the DVDs are made. Thank you all for coming.
welcome.